I live in a two-story house with my sister. What's called a mother-daughter home, meaning it's split into two separate living spaces with two kitchens. She takes the downstairs, and I've got the upstairs. She's rarely home since she stays most nights at her boyfriend's place about 20 miles away. Like I said, I'm 30 years old enough not to be scared of being alone. But sometimes it still gets to me. That night, I was home alone, sitting in my living room watching a scary movie. My section of the house has an open floor plan. Living room, dining room, and kitchen all flow together into one big space. The couch sits in the center, facing the TV, which means my back faces the rest of the dark room behind me that I used to work the night shift at a small hotel. And this happened about a year ago. I still think about it sometimes, and every time I do, I get that same sick feeling in my stomach. It was one of those nights that never should have happened, and I still don't know what the guy's plan was, or what he wanted. The place wasn't big, 3 floors, maybe 40 rooms total. On most weeknights, we'd barely fill 10 or 15 of them. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and it was usually mind-numbingly quiet. I'd sit behind the front desk, do paperwork, check the cameras now and then, maybe watch a few YouTube videos when it got too slow. The lobby was small too, just a front desk, a couple of couches, a TV that stayed off most of the night, and some vending machines in the corner. Behind me was a little glass office with a desk and a computer where I could see everything going on outside. At night, the front doors locked automatically, so guests had to buzz in, and I'd press the button to let them through. Most nights were uneventful. But one night, around 11 o'clock, something happened that still makes my stomach twist when I think about it. A man buzzed at the door. I let him in. He looked to be in his mid-40s, tall, a bit lean, wearing jeans, a baseball cap, and a backpack slung over one shoulder. He came up to the counter and asked for a room. I told him the price. He nodded and handed me a card. I swiped it. It went through fine. I gave him the key card to room 214 on the second floor. He just stood there for a few seconds too long, staring at me with this blank expression that made me uncomfortable. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator without a word. Nothing about him screamed danger, but something about the way he looked at me stuck in my head. About an hour later, around midnight, I looked up from my phone and saw him again. He was back in the lobby. Only this time, he didn't come to the desk. He just walked past me, slow and quiet, and sat down in one of the lounge chairs facing the TV. Except, the TV wasn't even on. He didn't grab a drink or ask for anything. He just sat there, staring at the blank screen like he was watching something only he could see. At first, I didn't think much of it. Some guests couldn't sleep. It wasn't that unusual for someone to hang out in the lobby at night. But after a while, I realized something strange. He wasn't doing anything. No phone, no book, no remote in his hand. He was just sitting perfectly still, eyes fixed on that dark TV screen. Half an hour passed. I got up to grab a bottle of water from the vending machine, and the moment I crossed the lobby, I could feel him watching me. I didn't look at him directly, but I knew his head turned. I could feel his eyes following me the whole way until I was back behind the desk. That's when the unease started creeping in. Around 1 a.m., I got bored and opened the hotel's computer system to check reservations. That's when I noticed something off. The room I'd checked him into, 214, was showing as vacant. I blinked, thinking I must have made a mistake. I checked again. Still blank. No name, no payment, no record of a check-in. I opened the transaction screen, expecting to see his card info, but there was nothing. No charge. No trace of him in the system at all. That cold, sinking feeling hit me right in the chest. I picked up the phone and called room 214. It rang and rang, no answer. Then I checked the keycard entry log. It showed nothing. The door hadn't been opened once that night. That's when I realized he'd never gone to the room. I looked back toward the lounge, and sure enough, he was still there. Still sitting in the same spot, staring at the dark TV. It felt like the air in the lobby had thickened, heavy and still. I sat there watching him, debating what to do. Maybe the system glitched. Maybe I'd swiped his card wrong. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. There was no entry log, no payment, nothing that said he belonged there. 15 minutes passed before I finally stood up and walked over. I asked if everything was okay. He slowly turned his head toward me. No expression, just this blank, hollow look. Then he said in a flat voice, "Couldn't sleep," and turned back toward the TV. I just nodded and backed away, pretending everything was fine, but my hands were shaking when I sat down again. By 2 a.m., he wasn't in the lounge anymore. I felt my stomach drop instantly. He wasn't on camera near the lobby either. Then I spotted him, standing at the end of the hallway near the bathrooms, half hidden in shadow. Just standing there. Still, I pretended to be focused on the computer, glancing up every few seconds. He didn't move. Then, slowly, he turned and walked back to the lounge and sat down again, as if nothing happened. That was when I called my manager at home. She sounded tired, told me to keep an eye on him, and call the police if he did anything threatening. I remember thinking, this already feels threatening. After I hung up, I pulled up the security cameras. On the first floor feed, I saw him walking down the hall, stopping at the very end. He stood there for several minutes, completely motionless, before turning back around. Then he went into the stairwell and stayed there for almost 10 minutes. Every time I looked up from the computer, he was somewhere else. By the vending machines, by the elevator, sometimes standing in the darker corners where the light barely reached. Always watching. By 3:30, I couldn't take it anymore. My hands were trembling so badly, I could barely type. I finally called the non-emergency police line and explained that there was a man in the building who didn't seem to be a guest. They said they'd send someone to check it out. While I waited, he moved again. This time, he came closer, standing maybe 15 feet from the front desk, just watching me. No blinking, no expression, just that same cold stare that made my skin crawl. I pretended to focus on the computer, but my breathing was shaky. Around 3:50, the buzzer sounded. I thought it was the cops, but it was just another guest returning late. I let the guest in quickly. The man's head turned as the guest walked past. His eyes followed him across the lobby, tracking every step until he disappeared down the hall. It wasn't just curiosity, it was like he was studying him. A few minutes later, he vanished again. I checked the cameras and froze. He was standing outside one of the guest room doors on the first floor. Just standing there. That's when I dialed 911. I told them he wasn't a registered guest, that he was outside a room, and I didn't know what he was trying to do. They said officers were on the way. I kept my eyes glued to the monitor. He stayed at that door for 3 minutes, then slowly turned and walked back to the lobby. When he came back, he walked straight up to the desk and leaned over the counter. His voice was so low, I almost didn't hear it. "Is there any food?" he asked. I told him there were vending machines in the corner. He gave this tiny smile, barely there, and walked away. At 4:10, the cops finally arrived. I buzzed them in and pointed straight toward the lounge. He was sitting there again, calm, like nothing had happened. They walked over, spoke to him for a few minutes, then let him outside. One officer came back and told me the truth. The guy wasn't a guest at all. The credit card he gave me was stolen. He had no reservation, no bags, nothing. He'd been wandering the halls for hours, pretending to belong there. They charged him with trespassing and card fraud. When they left, I just sat there, shaking until sunrise. Every time I looked at the cameras, I half expected to see him again. The part that still keeps me up is knowing he was inside that hotel for hours, walking around, standing outside guest doors, watching me from different corners. And he was never supposed to be there. I don't know what his plan was, but I know for sure it wasn't good. My name's Meredith. I'm 24, and I work nights at a small gas station off County Road 11, the kind of place people only stop at when they're desperate for gas or directions. I took the job because it was quiet, predictable, and paid enough for rent. I like that part. Or at least, I used to. It started on a Thursday around 1 a.m. The air outside was still and wet, and the steady hum of the lights above the pumps was crawling under my skin. I was just about to heat up a cinnamon roll I didn't even want when the bell above the door chimed. A man stepped in. Mid-40s, maybe older. Faded green jacket, messy hair, lips cracked and dry. He didn't go for coffee or chips like most do. He just stood there, staring at me, like he recognized me from somewhere. "Hey there," I said, forcing a small smile. "You always work this late?" he asked. "Yeah, mostly," I replied. He smiled, but it wasn't warm. I figured. I've driven through a few times. "You're always here." That sentence made me freeze a little inside. "Small town?" I said quickly, pretending to sound casual. He didn't leave. "Meredith, right?" I went cold. I wasn't wearing a name tag. I was about to ask how he knew when he motioned toward the whiteboard by the counter where I'd written cinnamon coffee is back. "You've got nice handwriting," he said. "Most people make circles for their dots. You use little slashes. It's thoughtful." I didn't reply. I couldn't. He didn't buy anything. Just watched me quietly for another minute before nodding. "I'm Paul," he said. "Just curious, that's all." Then he turned and walked out into the fog. After that night, things didn't go back to normal. Paul started showing up again, not every night, but often enough that I stopped pretending it was random. Sometimes he'd come inside and wander around the aisles, never really buying much. Other times, I'd just see the faint outline of his car parked near the edge of the lot, headlights off, engine silent, facing the station. The first few times, I told myself it was paranoia. But when you work alone in the middle of nowhere, paranoia starts to feel a lot like instinct. One night, close to 2 a.m., he came in again. He grabbed a bottle of water and placed it on the counter, studying me the way you'd study a painting, eyes tracing every detail. "You're quieter tonight," he said. "Long shift," I muttered. He nodded, glancing around the dim store like he was memorizing the shelves, the exits, every inch of the place. Then his gaze came back to me. "It must get lonely out here," he said softly. "Just you in the dark." "I'm fine," I replied quickly. He leaned against the counter, his expression calm but unblinking. "You ever get scared being a woman alone this late?" His tone wasn't threatening. That's what made it worse. He said it like he was asking about the weather, casual, curious. "Do you need anything else?" I asked, stepping back. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly. "You always keep the back room locked." "Smart. I notice you check it around 2 a.m. most nights." I froze. "How do you?" He smiled faintly, interrupting me. "I pay attention, that's all. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." Then, like always, he turned and left, disappearing into the fog. That night, I walked to my car with my keys wedged between my fingers and the sick feeling that someone might still be watching me. After that encounter, I started changing small things, locking my car the second I got in, keeping a tire iron under the counter, double-checking every door. I even switched my curtains and started showering with the bathroom door locked, though I lived alone. Some nights, he wouldn't come at all. Sometimes I'd go a whole week without seeing him, and that almost made it worse. The silence between sightings felt like a held breath, waiting to break. Then one night, during my shift, I stepped outside for a 10-minute break. When I came back, there was something sitting on the counter. A Polaroid. It was me, refilling the windshield washer bin behind the station. Taken from that night. And close. Way too close. There was no note, no message. But the photo had one detail circled in red ink. The small slash I used to dot the I in windshield on the bin label. The same slash he'd mentioned that first night. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. That was the first time I called the station manager and asked for an extra security camera. He said he'd look into it. The next time Paul came in, I didn't wait. I stood behind the counter, heart pounding. "You need to leave," I said. He paused. "Excuse me." I said, "Leave. If you don't, I'm calling the police." He didn't look angry. He just nodded slowly. "I get it," he said. "I've been too forward. You've been following me." I snapped, my voice cracking, and I hated that it did. Paul smiled faintly, like he pitied me. "I just think you're someone who's used to being misunderstood," he said. "I thought maybe you'd appreciate someone who notices." "That's not noticing," I said. "That's obsession." He didn't flinch. "Would it be easier if I brought a smile? A soda? Pretended not to see how your shoes are half a size too big, or how your eyelid twitches when you're tired?" My thumb was already on phone, dialing 911. He didn't stop me. He just watched, calm as ever, while I gave dispatcher our address. The police arrived faster than I expected. Paul didn't run. He didn't even argue. He just stood there in the middle of the store, hands at his sides, that same quiet expression on his face, like he'd been waiting for this moment all along. They cuffed him gently, as if they were dealing with a lost man, not a dangerous one. He didn't fight back. He didn't even look at me. When they searched his car, I watched from behind the glass. Inside, they found a small notepad. Every page was covered in neat, deliberate handwriting. Dates, times, notes, my schedule, when I arrived, when I left, what I wore, how long my breaks lasted, what groceries I'd bought last Thursday. And then one page stopped them all. It was my name, written over and over again, tighter each time, until the letters collapsed into dark spirals of ink. When the officer read it aloud, Paul just said, "I just noticed things. I'm a curious guy." The restraining order went through that same week. I didn't argue when the company offered to transfer me to another station, 2 hours away. New town, new routine. I even stopped working nights. But habits like fear don't fade. Sometimes when I drive home and headlights follow me for too long, I feel the back of my neck start to tingle. Sometimes I'll hear the soft hum of an engine idling somewhere nearby, and I'll think about how he used to sit in his car with the lights off, watching. And sometimes I still hear him in my head. The way he said my name, Meredith, like he already knew what it would sound like in his mouth. Like he'd been practicing it. At the time I'm writing this, it happened just last night. I'm a 22-year-old woman working the overnight shift at a 24-hour gas station, the kind that's quiet enough to make you forget it's part of the world. I've been there just under 2 months, working weekends, Thursday through Saturday. My coworker, Max, covers the other nights, Sunday through Wednesday. That night, around 2:30 a.m., Max dropped by with a friend. We'll call him Ben. They came in laughing, red-eyed, and grinning from ear to ear. I could tell right away they were high. Apparently, they'd taken some mushrooms a few hours before, and honestly, their spaced-out banter was the most entertaining thing I'd seen all night. As we talked, Ben pointed out something strange. He said there was a car parked in the lot with its lights off, but engine running. Someone was inside. When he'd asked Guy what he was doing, Ben just said he was waiting on a DoorDash order. That wouldn't be weird, except I hadn't gotten an order in 2 hours. I'd spent most of the night cleaning in back, where I couldn't even see the lot. We shrugged it off. Max and Ben went outside to smoke and play with Max's dog, who he always brought along. But when I was alone again, it started to gnaw at me. I hadn't seen that car come in. I didn't know how long it had been there. An hour later, they came back in for more coffee. That's when Max told me whole thing. How that car had been parked in a blind spot the entire time they were out there. Driver kept switching between watching them and typing on his phone, eyes flicking towards store. When Ben confronted him, man first pretended not to speak English, then changed his story, said he had the wrong address, and sped off. That alone was unnerving. But then Max noticed something worse. Car was brand new. No plates. Blankets piled in back seat, enough to hide someone under. And when that car pulled out of lot, another unmarked vehicle, also brand new, rolled out right behind. Max hung around for another 15 minutes after the cars left. Before heading out, he told me to stay alert, to keep an eye on the cameras and make sure the doors stayed locked. I laughed it off in front of him, but after he drove away, the silence hit me harder than usual. Every hum of the fluorescent lights and every gust against the glass door felt heavier, sharper. Around 6 a.m., the bell chimed again. It was Max, this time sober, looking serious. He said he couldn't stop thinking about how that man had acted. The way he'd been sitting there, pretending to text, but always glancing toward the lot's entrance and the store's doors. He wasn't waiting for food, Max said. He was waiting for something else. We talked for a while, both of us realizing how easily things could have gone wrong if I'd been alone. Max said the thought of it freaked him out. He told me that when the man sped off, the second car's timing wasn't random. It had been watching, waiting. When he finally left, I kept playing his words in my head. The security monitors showed nothing unusual, just black pavement, flickering lights, and an empty lot. But it didn't matter. I still double-checked the back door lock 3 times before sunrise. That morning, I told myself it was over. Maybe it really had been a coincidence. 2 drivers meeting by chance, nothing more. I wanted to believe that so badly that I convinced myself I did. But the next night, that illusion shattered. It was 3 a.m. I was mopping the floors when 4 men came in for coffee and snacks. Normal, friendly, just tired travelers. One of them looked out the window and asked, "Hey, do you know anything about that car out there?" I asked, "What car?" He said there was a brand new Subaru at the far end of the parking lot. Lights off, engine running. 2 guys were inside, arguing. The moment he said it, my stomach dropped. I froze for a second, gripping the counter tighter than I realized. My voice came out shaky when I asked the man to describe the car again. He said it was spotless, silver, no plates, windows tinted too dark for a normal driver. And it had been there when they pulled in. Just sitting. Engine running. He said as they pumped gas, they noticed the men inside weren't talking quietly. One of them was pointing toward the store, almost like giving directions. The other kept glancing between the doors and his phone screen, pacing his breathing like he was getting ready for something. When they walked past to come inside, one of the travelers, the oldest one, I think, turned toward the Subaru and asked, "You guys all right in there?" That's when the men inside suddenly froze. Then, without answering, They threw the car in reverse and sped off. No headlights, just the sound of tires scraping across gravel before vanishing into the dark. I stood there, heart hammering in my chest. That sounds like the same car from last night, I told them. They all looked at each other, eyebrows raised, and I explained everything. The man waiting in the parking lot, pretending to be a delivery driver, the missing plates, the second car that followed him. They got quiet after that. Then one of them said, "If you don't mind, we'll hang around a bit, just in case they come back." I tried to brush it off, said I'd be fine, but honestly, I was grateful. They stayed maybe 20 minutes, sipping their coffee, chatting softly, keeping an eye on the lot through the big windows. When they finally decided it was clear, I thanked them, even let them top off their coffee for free before they left. But the second the bell over door stopped ringing, I felt that same old silence crawl back in, like something alive and waiting. I told myself it was nothing, that I'd gotten lucky twice, and went back to cleaning. Still, every time automatic doors shifted from the wind, my chest tightened. Nothing else happened for the rest of my shift, at least, nothing I could see. But I kept glancing out the window, searching the edges of the parking lot, half expecting those headlights to flicker back on. By 5:45 a.m., the sky started turning gray, and the tension in my chest eased just enough for me to breathe normally again. When I finally stepped outside to change the trash bags by the pumps, the morning air was cold, almost metallic. The lot was empty, or so I thought. That's when I noticed faint tire tracks in the far corner, right where the Subaru had been parked. They were fresh. I remember just standing there for a moment, trash bag in hand, my eyes fixed on the tracks leading toward the highway. It didn't prove anything, but it was enough to remind me that whoever was in that car had been closer than I wanted to believe. The creepiest part? I never actually saw the car myself. Every single time, it was someone else who pointed it out. Different people, on different nights, describing the same thing. A brand new car with no plates, lights off, running in silence. At first, I told myself it couldn't be real. Coincidence, maybe. But 2 nights in a row, at the same time, parked where I couldn't see it from the counter? That's not coincidence, that's planning. And the more I think about it, the more I realize how lucky I was that Max and Ben were there that first night. If they hadn't been in the parking lot, loud, laughing, visible, maybe that car wouldn't have waited. Maybe it would have acted. I'm off for the next few days, but I can't shake the dread that when I go back, it'll be waiting again. Same car. Same empty spot at the edge of the lot. Engine running. Lights off. Just waiting. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can almost hear it. The soft purr of that unseen engine in the dark, and the quiet certainty that someone out there had already picked me as their next target. Nothing else happened for the rest of my shift. At least, nothing I could see. But I kept glancing out the window, searching the edges of the parking lot, half expecting those headlights to flicker back on. By 5:45 a.m., the sky started turning gray, and the tension in my chest eased just enough for me to breathe normally again. When I finally stepped outside to change the trash bags by the pumps, the morning air was cold, almost metallic. The lot was empty, or so I thought. That's when I noticed faint tire tracks in the far corner, right where the Subaru had been parked. They were fresh. I remember just standing there for a moment, trash bag in hand, my eyes fixed on the tracks leading toward the highway. It didn't prove anything, but it was enough to remind me that whoever was in that car had been closer than I wanted to believe. The creepiest part? I never actually saw the car myself. Every single time, it was someone else who pointed it out. Different people, on different nights, describing the same thing. A brand new car with no plates, lights off, running in silence. At first, I told myself it couldn't be real. Coincidence, maybe. But 2 nights in a row, at the same time, parked where I couldn't see it from the counter? That's not coincidence, that's planning. And the more I think about it, the more I realize how lucky I was that Max and Ben were there that first night. If they hadn't been in the parking lot, loud, laughing, visible, maybe that car wouldn't have waited. Maybe it would have acted. I'm off for the next few days, but I can't shake the dread that when I go back, it'll be waiting again. Same car. Same empty spot at the edge of the lot. Engine running. Lights off. Just waiting. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I can almost hear it. The soft purr of that unseen engine in the dark, and the quiet certainty that someone out there had already picked me as their next target. My name's Daniel, and I'm 29. I work the graveyard shift at a small roadside motel out in the middle of nowhere. It's family-owned, not part of any chain, Just 2 floors, about 25 rooms, and the kind of place travelers stop at when they're too tired to keep driving. My shift runs from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and most nights, the place is dead quiet. Maybe a couple of late check-ins after midnight, but that's about it. Honestly, that's what I like about it. I'm not great with people, and sitting in an empty building through the night suits me fine. The setup's simple. The front office has the reception desk, a few chairs, a coffee machine, and one of those racks full of dusty brochures for nearby attractions no one ever visits. Behind that desk is a hallway that leads to the back office, a lounge area just for staff. There's a couch, a mini fridge, and a small TV mounted on the wall. There's also a little speaker in the back that chimes whenever someone rings the front desk bell. So, I usually hang out in the lounge, watch something on my laptop, maybe doze off for a bit. When the bell rings, I just get up and head out front. After a few months on the job, I'd gotten used to the usual sounds of the place. The creaking walls, the heater clicking on, the front door buzzing when a guest swipes their key card after hours. All normal. But if you've ever worked the night shift, you know that normal noises start to play tricks on you after a while. Every creak feels closer. Every sound feels like it means something. It was one of those cold autumn nights when everything went wrong. The lot outside was nearly empty, just 4 or 5 cars from guests who'd checked in earlier. Around 2 a.m., I heard the bell. I got up from the couch and went to the front desk. Nobody was there. The lobby was empty. I checked through the glass doors. Nothing but the empty road and the cold glow of the parking lot lights. Not a single car pulling in. No headlights. I stood there for a moment, waiting. Silence. Then I told myself maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe the sound came from the TV or my half-asleep brain. But the bell was distinct, sharp, metallic. I knew what I'd heard. So I shrugged it off and went back to the lounge. Not even 10 minutes later, that bell rang again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I jumped up, walked fast to the front, and my stomach dropped when I saw the lobby was, again, completely empty. The lights hummed overhead. The air felt colder than before, and every hair on my arm stood on end. I stared at that little silver bell sitting on the counter like it had a life of its own. I stepped outside, trying to catch someone in the act. The lot was still the same. 4 or 5 parked cars, dark windows, no movement. The road stretched out in both directions, black and silent. The only sound was the hum of the motel's neon sign flickering above me. I even walked a few steps toward the edge of the lot, shining my phone flashlight across the parked cars. Nothing. Not a soul. When I went back inside, I decided I wasn't leaving the front desk again. I pulled the chair out, sat down, and waited. Maybe some drunk was having fun messing with me, or maybe a guest's kid thought it was funny. Either way, I was done being their entertainment. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. The silence started to lull me. The rhythmic tick of the clock behind me and the soft hum of the fridge from the back office almost made me forget the tension that had knotted my stomach. I opened my laptop, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe the sound came from the old wiring, or maybe I was just overtired. But then, the bell rang. I froze. My head snapped up so fast my neck cracked. The counter was empty. The lobby was still. That was the moment my nerves started to break. I got up, walked around the desk, crouched to check under it. Nothing. I checked the side hallway, the bathrooms, even peeked out the front doors again. There was nobody. The stillness had a pulse to it, like the entire building was holding its breath. When I finally came back to the desk, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to hide in the lounge again. If someone was creeping around and ringing that bell just to screw with me, I was going to catch them. I turned off a few of the lobby lights so the room was dim and quiet, the way night truly feels when the world's asleep. Then I sat down, eyes locked on the bell. Every sound seemed to echo, the buzz of the light, the tick of the wall clock, the soft hum of the heater kicking in. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. My eyes grew heavy, and I started to drift. Then the bell rang again. But this time, I didn't just hear it. I saw why it rang. A pale hand rose slowly from beneath the front desk and pressed the bell right in front of me. I froze. That hand, thin, pale, almost gray, had reached up so silently that I hadn't even heard movement before it hit the bell. The sound echoed through the empty lobby, sharp and hollow. For a full second, I couldn't move. Then everything hit me at once. Terror, adrenaline, disbelief. I stumbled backwards so fast that the chair nearly toppled over. My pulse pounded in my ears as I bolted down the hallway into the back office, slammed the door, and twisted the lock. Then I just stood there in the dark, breathing like I'd run a mile. My brain scrambled to catch up with what I'd seen. There was no way anyone should have been under that desk. There wasn't enough space for a person to even fit there comfortably, unless they'd been crouched, pressed in tight, waiting for me. The thought made my stomach twist. I forced myself to turn toward the security monitors mounted on the wall above the filing cabinet. My hand shook as I hit the button to switch to the lobby camera feed. The image flickered, then came into focus. The chair I'd been sitting in had fallen backward, just like I thought. The desk counter looked empty. Then, movement. In the corner of the frame, something shifted behind the desk. A shape, then a head. It slowly rose into view, just enough to reveal the glint of two eyes staring straight into the camera lens. I felt my knees weaken. My breath caught in my throat. The figure stayed there, motionless, for what felt like an eternity, just staring. Then it slipped out of view. I backed away from the monitor, whispering to myself, "No, no, no, no." My hand found my phone, and I dialed 911. My voice came out in a broken whisper as I told the dispatcher there was someone inside the building, someone hiding behind the front desk. She told me to stay put, to keep the door locked, and that officers were on the way. While she talked, I stared back up at the screen. The head was gone. But the next moment, the man crawled out from behind the desk. She told me to stay put, to keep the door locked, and that officers were on the way. While she talked, I stared back up at the screen. The head was gone. But the next moment, the man crawled out from behind the desk on his hands and knees. He stood up slowly, tall, wearing a black hoodie with the hood pulled tight, his face mostly hidden in shadow. His posture was hunched, jerky, like his body didn't quite know how to move right. He turned and started walking around the lobby. Then he stopped, facing the hallway, the one that led directly to the door I was behind. The hallway camera flickered as he started toward me. I could hear my own breathing, ragged, shallow, like I was trying not to exist. The dispatcher's voice came through the phone again, calm but urgent. "Daniel, are you in a safe place? Stay on the line. Officers are close." But I couldn't answer, because right then, the doorknob rattled. Just once, slow, deliberate, not frantic, not testing, like he wanted me to know he was there. Then silence. I stared at the knob, my heartbeat thudding in my throat, every instinct screaming not to move. My hand was slick with sweat around the phone. After what felt like a full minute, I heard footsteps. Slow, heavy ones moving away from the door. I forced myself to look up at the monitor again. The man was back in the lobby. He wasn't rushing or panicked. He just wandered. He stood at the glass doors and stared outside, the parking lot lights faintly glowing against his hoodie. Then he turned and walked to the brochure rack, flipping through pamphlets as if browsing for a weekend getaway. It was almost worse than if he'd attacked. The calmness, the patience. Minutes dragged by, and then finally, flashes of blue and red lights filled the lot. The police. The man froze for half a heartbeat, then darted out of frame. I heard the front doors open. The dispatcher told me to stay where I was. A few seconds later, officers called my name from the lobby. When they cleared the building, they found a large rock near the front door. He'd used it to keep the door from locking behind him. But he was gone. They searched the parking lot, the road, even behind the dumpsters. Nothing. He'd slipped away into the night. I stood there shaking as they took my statement. Every time one of the officers asked a question, my mind kept replaying it, the pale hand reaching over the counter, pressing the bell like it was nothing. So calm, so certain. They told me he was probably gone for good. Maybe some drifter, maybe someone who'd been watching the place. But now, every night when I sit at that same desk and the bell rings, my body tenses before I even realize it. Because no matter how many times it happens, I can't stop seeing that hand. And I can't stop wondering how long he'd been hiding there before I ever noticed.